You won't believe this. I said no to babysitting my sister's kids, and my dad? He freaking disowned me. Online. Like publicly. But what happened after? That's the real kicker. You won't believe this. I said no to babysitting my sister's kids, and my dad? He freaking disowned me. Online. Like publicly. At first, I thought he was just mad, maybe overreacting a little. But then I saw the post. A long dramatic rant about how I'm selfish, how I abandon family values, and even how he no longer considers me his child. And guess what? It didn't stop there. Relatives started messaging me, some calling me heartless, others saying I needed to apologize. My phone blew up with texts, missed calls, and guilt-tripping voice messages. All because I didn't want to babysit. But here's the thing. There's a whole side of the story no one knows. And if they did, they might just change their minds. See, my sister treats me like a built-in babysitter. It's not just a one-time favor, it's constant. Every weekend last-minute calls, guilt-tripping me if I say no. And my dad? He's always taken her side. This time, I finally stood my ground. I had plans, I was exhausted, and honestly, I was tired of being used. But instead of respecting my decision, my dad went nuclear. He didn't just cut me off, he made sure the entire family knew. My aunt called, telling me to fix this before it's too late. My cousin texted, saying I was being dramatic. Even my grandma, who never takes sides, told me to apologize for the sake of peace. But here's what no one seems to get. I'm not just refusing to babysit. I'm refusing to be taken for granted. And if that means losing my dad, then maybe he was never really in my corner to begin with. But the craziest part? The internet got involved. My dad's post wasn't just for family, it spread. Friends, old classmates, even co-workers started reaching out, either picking sides or just watching the drama unfold. Some people supported me, saying I had every right to set boundaries. Others called me selfish, saying family comes first. Meanwhile, my sister stayed silent, letting the storm rage on while I dealt with the fallout. And my dad? He doubled down, acting like I'd committed some unforgivable betrayal. But here's the thing. If saying no to being treated like a free nanny means I lose my family, then maybe they were never really my family to begin with. And as much as it hurts, I'm starting to realize, maybe this was the wake-up call I needed. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, my dad blocked me. Completely. No calls, no texts, nothing. It was like I never existed. The man who raised me, who was supposed to love me unconditionally, erased me from his life over something so small. But you know what? As much as it hurt, there was also a strange sense of relief. No more guilt trips, no more pressure to always say yes. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had control over my own life. And then something unexpected happened. People started reaching out, not to attack me, but to share their own stories. Turns out I'm not alone. So many people have been through the same thing. Cut off for setting boundaries, shamed for choosing themselves. And suddenly, I realized, maybe losing my dad wasn't the end of the world. Maybe it was the start of something better. But just as I started to accept my new reality, something unexpected happened. My sister finally spoke up. After days of watching the chaos unfold, she sent me a long message. At first, I thought it was another guilt trip, another attempt to make me apologize. But instead, she admitted something shocking. She never asked Dad to do any of this. She never wanted him to cut me off or drag our family into it. In fact, she felt awful about how things escalated. I didn't think he'd go this far, she wrote. I just needed help, but I never wanted you to feel like you had to. For the first time, I saw things from her side. How much pressure she was under as a single mom. How Dad had always treated her like the golden child, but controlled her just as much as he tried to control me. And suddenly, it hit me. Maybe this wasn't just about babysitting. Maybe this was about something bigger. Breaking free from the expectations that have been forced on us for years. And if my own sister could see that, then maybe there was hope after all. But even with my sister's message, the damage was done. My dad still refused to talk to me. And most of the family had already made up their minds. I wasn't just selfish. I was the villain of the story. And honestly, I was tired of fighting for a place in a family that didn't respect me. So I made a choice. Instead of begging to be let back in, I walked away. I focused on myself, on building a life where I wasn't constantly trying to prove my worth. And you know what? It was the best decision I ever made. Because for the first time, I was living for me. No guilt, no obligations, no walking on eggshells. Just freedom. And as painful as it was to lose my dad, I realized something even more important. The people who truly love you don't cut you off for setting boundaries. They respect you. They listen. And if they don't, then maybe they were never really your people to begin with. Months passed, and life started to feel normal again. Or at least, a new kind of normal. I built a stronger support system with friends who actually respected my boundaries. I stopped feeling guilty for choosing myself. And just when I thought I had finally moved on, my dad reached out. A short cold message. We need to talk. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he did, just a demand like always. For a split second, the old me wanted to jump, to fix things, to make him happy. But then I remembered everything. The public humiliation. The way he erased me so easily. The way my feelings never seemed to matter. And I realized, I didn't have to answer. I didn't owe him anything. So I took a deep breath, deleted the message, and chose peace. Because sometimes, the hardest lesson to learn is that not every relationship is worth saving. And that's okay. And that was the moment I truly felt free. No more chasing validation. No more bending over backward for people who never met me halfway. It wasn't easy. There were days when I missed having a father, when I wondered if I made the right choice. But then I'd remember, love isn't conditional. Respect isn't something you have to beg for. And family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, even when you set boundaries. So I moved forward. I built a life where I was valued, not just useful. And while my dad may never understand my decision, I finally do. And that's all that matters. Looking back, I don't regret a thing. Losing my dad was painful. But losing myself to please him would have been so much worse. And the best part, walking away made room for better things. Real friendships, genuine connections, a sense of self-worth I never had before. I stopped being the person who said yes, just to keep the peace, and became someone who stood up for themselves. And if there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's this. Sometimes, the people who walk away from you are doing you a favor. Because in the end, the ones who truly care won't make you choose between their love and your own happiness. They'll respect both. And that's the kind of people I want in my life. Looking back, I see everything so clearly now. It was never just about babysitting. It was about control, about expectations, about a lifetime of being conditioned to put everyone else first. My dad disowning me online was just the final straw. The moment that forced me to see the truth I had been avoiding for years. I spent so much of my life bending, breaking, contorting myself into whatever shape would make them happy. Always saying yes because I was afraid of what no would cost me. And when I finally said it, just once, just for myself, their reaction told me everything I needed to know. Love shouldn't be conditional. Respect shouldn't have to be earned through sacrifice. Family should be about support, not obligation. But my family didn't see it that way, and for the first time I stopped trying to change their minds. I stopped explaining, stopped justifying, stopped chasing validation from people who were never going to give it to me freely. Instead, I built something better. I surrounded myself with people who actually cared, who saw me as a person, not just as a resource. I let go of the guilt, the weight of their disappointment, the fear that I was being selfish just for wanting a say in my own life. And now, standing on the other side of it all, I don't feel broken, I feel free. My dad may never understand why I walked away. My family may never forgive me for choosing myself. But that's okay. Because at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to live with my choices. And for the first time in my life, I can finally say that I'm living for me. Of course, there are moments when the past sneaks up on me. Old memories, the sound of my dad's laughter from when I was a kid, the weight of what I lost. But then I remind myself, I didn't lose a father. I lost a version of him that never truly saw me for who I am. I lost the illusion that love should come with conditions, that my worth was measured by how much I could endure. And in losing that, I found something far more valuable: self-respect. I no longer apologize for setting boundaries, No longer feel guilty for choosing peace over toxicity. I no longer spend nights wondering if I should have just said yes one more time, because I know now that one more yes would have turned into a lifetime of them. And as time passes, I realize that walking away wasn't just an act of defiance. It was an act of love. Love for myself, for the life I deserve, for the future I refuse to compromise. Some people will never understand that, and that's fine. I don't need them to. Because in the end, the people who truly matter are the ones who don't make you beg for their acceptance. They give it freely, without conditions, without ultimatums, without forcing you to prove your loyalty through sacrifice. And those are the people I choose to hold on to. So no, I don't regret anything. I don't regret saying no. I don't regret walking away. And most of all, I don't regret finally choosing myself. And the best part? I'm finally living a life that feels like mine. No more guilt-laden phone calls, no more anxiety every time my phone buzzes, no more walking on eggshells just to keep the peace. I wake up every day knowing that my choices are mine alone, that I don't have to justify my existence through servitude to people who never truly valued me. I've built new relationships, ones based on mutual respect, not obligation. I've discovered that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who uplift you, who support you even when you say no, who love you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. And as I move forward, I realize that my past no longer defines me. I am not the selfish daughter, the ungrateful sister, the villain in someone else's dramatic retelling of events. I am just me, someone who finally had the courage to break free. And if losing certain people was the price I had to pay to find myself, then it was worth every second. Because now I am at peace. And no amount of guilt, no desperate attempts to drag me back into that toxic cycle, will ever make me regret choosing my own happiness over their expectations. And what's even more surprising, the more I embraced this new life, the more I realized how many people were trapped in the same cycle I had just escaped. Friends, coworkers, even distant acquaintances started opening up to me, sharing their own stories of being the family doormat, of always being the one expected to sacrifice, of losing themselves in the name of keeping others happy. And as I listened, I saw my past self in them, the version of me that thought love had to be earned through endurance, that boundaries were just another word for selfishness. But I know better now. Love isn't measured by how much you're willing to suffer for it. Real love, whether from family, friends, or a partner, doesn't demand self-sacrifice as proof of loyalty. And if walking away from my dad, from that toxic dynamic, means I'm seen as the bad guy in someone else's story, so be it. I'd rather be the villain in their version of events than the victim in my own life. So I keep moving forward. I keep choosing myself. And for the first time in my life, I'm not looking back. And as time passes, something incredible happens. I stop feeling the need to explain myself. I stop replaying the past, wondering if there was some magic combination of words that could have made them understand. Because the truth is, people who refuse to see your worth will never be convinced, no matter how much you explain. And I'm done trying. I don't need their validation to know I made the right choice. I don't need their approval to live my life on my terms. I no longer flinch at the thought of family gatherings I'm not invited to, no longer wonder what they say about me behind closed doors. Their opinions have no power over me anymore. What does have power? The life I've built since walking away. The freedom to say no without fear. The deep, fulfilling relationships I've nurtured with people who actually respect me. And most of all, the unshakable knowledge that I am enough, just as I am, without bending, without shrinking, without sacrificing my own happiness to fit someone else's expectations. That's the kind of peace I never knew existed. And now that I have it, I'll never let it go. And in that peace I find something even more powerful: self-love. Not the fleeting kind that comes from external validation, but the deep, unshakable kind that grows from truly knowing your worth. I no longer measure my value by how much I give, how much I endure, or how well I fit into someone else's narrative. I define it myself. I wake up every day with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needs permission to exist as they are. I make decisions based on what feels right for me, not out of fear of disappointing others. I surround myself with people who uplift me, not those who see me as a resource to be drained. And for the first time, I truly understand what it means to belong, not to a family that only accepted me on their terms, but to myself. I no longer chase love that comes with conditions. I no longer fight for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. Instead, I build my own table, invite those who respect me, and leave the past where it belongs. Because in the end, the greatest lesson I've learned is this: I am whole, I am worthy, and I don't need to prove that to anyone but myself. And with that realization, the weight I carried for so long finally lifts. The guilt, the doubt, the endless need to justify myself. It all fades into the background. I no longer feel the pull to fix what was never mine to fix. I no longer crave approval from people who were only willing to love me on their terms. Instead, I embrace the life I've built. A life where I am valued, not used. A life where my worth isn't measured by how much I can give, but by the simple fact that I exist. And as I walk forward unburdened by the past, I know one thing for certain. I did the right thing. Not just by saying no, not just by walking away, but by finally choosing myself. And if that makes me selfish in their eyes, then so be it. Because I would rather be selfish and free than selfless and lost. And that, more than anything, is why I have no regrets. And as I step fully into this new chapter of my life, I realize something else. I am happier than I ever thought possible. Not because everything is perfect, not because I don't sometimes miss the idea of what my family should have been, but because for the first time, I am truly at peace with myself. I no longer carry the weight of their expectations, no longer feel the need to shrink myself to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. I have created a life where I am surrounded by people who see me, who respect me, who love me without conditions. I have learned that setting boundaries isn't an act of selfishness, it's an act of self-preservation. I have discovered that I am not defined by the people who walked away from me, but by the strength it took to walk away from them. And now, standing on the other side of it all, I know with absolute certainty, choosing myself was the best decision I ever made. Because at the end of the day, I am not just surviving, I am thriving. And that is something no one can ever take away from me. And with each passing day, I grow even stronger in that truth. I no longer second-guess my decisions, no longer feel the urge to explain myself to those who never truly listened. The doubts that once whispered in the back of my mind have quieted, replaced by a deep, unshakable belief in myself. I have built a life filled with genuine connection, love, and respect. Not because I fought for scraps of affection from those who withheld it, but because I finally opened my heart to those who give it freely. And as I move forward, I realize something even more powerful. I am not just healing, I am thriving. Not in spite of what happened, but because of it. Because walking away wasn't just about leaving behind a toxic dynamic. It was about stepping into the person I was always meant to be. And that person, she is strong. She is free. She is finally unapologetically at peace. And for the first time in my life, I know that I don't need anyone's permission to be happy. I create my own happiness. I choose myself. And that choice will always be enough. As time went on, the weight of my decisions settled into something lighter. Something almost like freedom. The echoes of my family's disappointment no longer had the power they once did. Their silence, once suffocating, became a space in which I could finally breathe. And in that space, I built a life that was mine, not one dictated by obligations I never agreed to. Then one day my sister called. Not a text, not a passive-aggressive voicemail, a real, actual phone call. For a moment, I debated ignoring it. I stared at her name on my screen, feeling the old anxieties creep in. But something in me was different now. I wasn't the same person who had once jumped to answer, to smooth things over, to make everyone else feel better at my own expense. So I answered, but on my terms. Her voice was hesitant, softer than I expected. Hey. A pause. Then she exhaled, as if she'd been holding her breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I waited. Not because I needed an apology to move forward, but because I wanted to hear what she had to say, when I wasn't rushing to fill the silence. I should have stood up for you, she continued. I should have told Dad to stop before it got that bad. But I was scared. I didn't want to lose him too. I swallowed, my throat tight. I get it. And I did. More than she probably realized. She sighed again. I miss you. That's when I knew things had truly changed. Because I didn't feel the immediate need to say it back. Not out of spite, but because I had spent so much time losing myself for the sake of others. Now, I wanted to be sure before I gave any piece of myself away again. I miss what we used to be, I admitted. But I don't miss being treated like I don't matter. Her silence stretched between us, and for a moment, I thought she'd hang up. But then she surprised me. I don't want you to feel that way. And I don't want to be the reason you do. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't a grand gesture of reconciliation. But it was real, honest. And that was more than I had gotten from most of my family. So we started there. Rebuilding wasn't about going back to the way things were. It was about moving forward in a way that didn't require me to sacrifice myself. It meant setting clear boundaries and standing by them. It meant knowing that I could love my sister without being her crutch. As for my dad, I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. And in doing so, I freed myself. Life continued. I thrived. And every day, I proved to myself that choosing my own happiness had been the right decision. Because in the end, real love doesn't demand that you break yourself to fit someone else's mold. It lets you be whole. And that's exactly what I intended to be. Then months later, I got another unexpected message. This time from my aunt. Unlike the others, she didn't demand an apology or lecture me about family loyalty. Instead, she simply wrote, "I understand why you did it. And I hope you're okay." For the first time I felt seen. Maybe, just maybe, change was possible. Maybe the ripples of my decision were larger than I had imagined. And while I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore, it was nice to know that at least one person in my family was starting to understand. Then another surprise, my cousin reached out. He had always stayed neutral, never inserting himself into family drama. But this time he wanted to talk. "I never said anything," he admitted. "But I always admired how you stood up for yourself. I wish I had that kind of courage." His words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe I hadn't just been standing up for myself. Maybe I had been showing others that they could do the same. And that realization, more than anything, made all the pain and isolation worth it. For so long, I had believed that walking away meant losing everything. That choosing myself meant closing the door on my family for good. But maybe, just maybe, I had only closed the door on the parts that were hurting me. The parts that made me feel small, invisible, obligated to be everything for everyone. And in doing so, I had left room for something new, something better. My sister and I kept talking. Not every day, not like before, but in a way that felt healthier. No guilt, no pressure, no expectation that I would fix things. Just two people trying to figure out if there was something worth salvaging. My aunt sent another message a few weeks later. Then my cousin, even an old family friend who had seen the drama unfold, reached out to say, "I get it. I've been there too." And the more I let go of the version of my family I had once clung to, the more I saw the truth. I wasn't the villain. I never had been. I was just the first one brave enough to say, "This isn't okay." The first one willing to take the fallout, to endure the loneliness, to set a precedent that boundaries are not betrayals. I wasn't waiting for my dad to reach out again. If he did, I knew it would be on his terms, his conditions, his need for control. And that was a game I was no longer willing to play. Instead, I focused on what I had gained. Freedom. Self-respect. A life where I got to decide what family meant to me, instead of being forced into a role I never agreed to. And as I sat with that, with the quiet understanding that I had built something stronger than what I had lost, I smiled. Because in the end, I hadn't lost my family. I had just found my way back to myself. And that was everything. For so long, I had been chasing love that felt more like an obligation, trying to earn a place in a family that only valued me when I was useful. But walking away had taught me something powerful. Real love doesn't come with conditions. It doesn't punish you for setting boundaries. It doesn't demand your silence in exchange for acceptance. And as I moved forward, I realized something even more important. I wasn't just surviving without them. I was thriving. My friendships grew deeper, built on mutual respect instead of obligation. My anxiety lessened, no longer tied to the constant fear of disappointing people who would never be satisfied. I found joy in the smallest moments, in the kind of peace I never thought I'd have. And most of all, I found myself. Not the person my family expected me to be. Not the version of me that bent over backward to please everyone else. Just me, unapologetic, strong, and finally free. So no, I don't regret saying no. I don't regret walking away. And I definitely don't regret choosing myself. Because at the end of the day, the people who truly love you, they don't make you beg for it. They love you for who you are, not what you can do for them. And that's the only kind of love I'll ever accept again. And you know what? I don't look back anymore. There's no point in holding on to people who can't love without conditions, who take your care for granted, who see your right to say no as a challenge to their authority. I no longer explain my decisions to those who refuse to listen. No longer justify my right to my own life to those who call me selfish simply because I refuse to be a convenient resource. I no longer measure my worth by how many times I said yes at my own expense, how many times I stayed silent, compromised, or sacrificed myself for someone else's comfort. I no longer feel guilty for choosing myself, because I've learned the most important truth. Love should not be a reward for endurance. Family should not be a cage. And respect is not something you have to beg for. I no longer live to fit into someone else's expectations. And I no longer fear losing people who never truly saw me in the first place. Because what I've gained is far more valuable than what I lost. I've found peace, freedom, people who accept me without conditions. And most importantly, I found myself. And with that realization, the weight I carried for so long finally disappeared. No more guilt, no more second-guessing. No more bending myself into shapes that made others comfortable while suffocating me. I stopped chasing love that came with terms and conditions. Stopped trying to prove my worth to people who only valued me when I was useful. I let go of the need to explain, to fix, to mend relationships that were never built on mutual respect in the first place. And in that letting go, I found something I never thought I would: true, unshakable peace. The kind that doesn't waver with someone's approval, or crumble under someone's disappointment. The kind that comes from knowing, deep in my bones, that I am enough. That I always was. I no longer look for closure where there is none. No longer wait for apologies that will never come. Instead, I walk forward lighter, stronger, freer than I've ever been. Because choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. And now, for the first time in my life, I am truly, unapologetically happy. And as I step fully into this new chapter of my life, I realize something profound. I am not broken. I am not lost. And I am certainly not the villain in my own story. I am whole. I am free. And I am finally at peace with the choices I made. There will always be moments when the past tries to pull me back. When the echoes of old guilt whisper in my ear. When I wonder what might have been if I had just kept saying yes. But then I remember the life I have now. The quiet mornings without anxiety. The friendships built on mutual respect. The feeling of knowing that I belong not because I serve, but simply because I am. And that is enough. I no longer crave validation from those who refuse to see my worth. I no longer seek love that demands my silence in return. Instead, I build my own life, surrounded by people who uplift me, who respect me, who love me for who I am, not for what I can do for them. And as I move forward, I carry one undeniable truth with me. Choosing myself wasn't just the best decision I ever made. It was the one that saved me. If this video hurt you, don't keep it to yourself. Send it to those who will understand.